5, 4, 3, hold on, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Fathering the Autism Spectrum Forum. This is sponsored by Thriving on the Spectrum. I'm Dwayne Ballin, your host, author of the book Journey with Julian, and the son and the father of a young adult on the spectrum. Recently, a report came out that indicated that there has been a 40% increase in autism since 2014 in the Black and Hispanic communities. That comes from the JAMA Network Open Study. The prevalence in our country now is 1 in 54. When my son Julian, who's 27 years of age, was diagnosed back in 1997, that prevalence rate was 1 in 10,000. So it has been a dramatic increase. We plan to discuss it during this forum: fatherhood, what it means to father a child on the spectrum, the impact it's had on our family, and where we go and how we navigate it. Joining me on the conversation will be Dr. Cedric Byte, Mr. Zach Hawkins, and Mr. Frederick Davis. We will ask each of those gentlemen to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their family and their autism scenario. Dr. Byte, let's start with you.
Thank you so much. It's indeed a pleasure and an honor to be with you this evening and talk about this very important subject matter. I am Dr. Cedric Byte. I'm a general internist by training. I am the Associate Dean for Admissions at the Brody School of Medicine, as well as the Interim Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion. And I'm a past president of the National Medical Association, as well as the Old North State Medical Society. So glad to be a part of this forum today. I'll stop there, let the others.
We want to know about your place in the autism community also. That's part of our introduction.
All right, that's fine. I didn't know if we wanted to introduce.
Yes, no, please. Yes.
All right. So I'm the father of Andrew. My wife, Maria, and I were blessed to have a son named Andrew, and we've named him Andrew. Andrew is autistic. He is on a high functioning autistic scale, and he is now 13 years old, almost 14 years old, and he's 6 feet tall. And he is just the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. And I am the proudest father in the world, although he's already made me pull all my hair
out. That does sound familiar. Mr. Davis?
Good evening. I hope all is well. I'm Frederick Davis. When I'm not raising 3 children under 6, I serve as the current Director of Design and Construction for Durham Public Schools. My passion has always been architecture and planning. While I have an architecture degree from the Hampton University that you see illustriously laid out in your background, my passion has always been for the role that design and construction plays in the built environment. And it's not by happenstance that I found myself back into the school system, working with diverse abilities of children from the K through 12 sector, hoping to land an impact in the design and construction world to really think about how kids do learn. This is a forum on children, fathers who have children on the spectrum. My oldest son, Frederick Amos Davis III, when he was born, we thought about calling him Trip. But as we found of his diagnosis at 3, we thought it'd be best to just stick with Frederick right now. And as he gets older, perhaps the nickname will carry on with him. But Frederick, we noticed early on, having younger cousins his same age, that he was not necessarily developing at some of the milestones that the pediatrics tell you. And so my wife, who is my partner in crime in this, and I guess we'll get into family structures later on, but thought it would be good to have him diagnosed. And so we've been working with him. He's now 6 now since that diagnosis, and I'm proud as can be of my namesake, and I can't wait to share more information and learn as well today.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yeah, thank you, Dwayne, for pulling us together and having this amazing conversation. I'm a guy who's lived in Durham for over 20 years. I love this town. I get a chance to serve and be a part of this community. By profession, I work in development at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, removing financial barriers through fundraising and advancement. And it sort of fits who I am because I would be doing it for free if I could. And in many ways, my community, I do just that. And I'm the proud dad of two little boys on the autism spectrum, Adam, who's 5, and James Preston, who's soon to be 7. And as everyone has said, their learning abilities just add a different spice to fatherhood. Because, they are just so special in their own ways and their own personalities and the way that they see the world and make us see the world. And so I'm a proud dad, and I'm so honored to be here with this great panel talking about something that a lot of folks should be talking about every single day.
Frederick mentioned earlier that they had noticed in their son, Frederick, that when he was around 3, they went to process. Dr. Bright and Mr. Hawkins, tell me, at what point did you notice that something was not as it should be, and when did you act? We'll start with you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yeah. So, for us, it was right between 16 to 18 months for both of them. It was for James Preston, it started with the tantrums that lasted for 20 and sometimes 30 minutes.
Sure.
Like, I've seen kids all my life, right? I, have an older son, and don't remember any of that. And so when it's uncontrollable, unconsolable, it just, something that's there. And those are sort of the first signs, as well as you mentioned some of the milestones. But for Adam, he seemed incredibly, neurotypical up until 16 months.
Sure.
And then he would go times without speaking, times without making eye contact. And so because we had seen it before, we knew how to act. And so I would say for James Preston was probably around 2.5. And for Adam, it was a little earlier than that because we noticed right at 6 months, he wouldn't even turn around to be announced by his name, to recognize his name. And so it was that early. And when we tried to make sure that as early as possible, we jumped on. But for Adam, it was around 2, and for James Preston, 2.5. And for James Preston, it was around 2.5, almost 3.
Dr. Bright, how about Andrew?
So for us, it's really interesting. That's the first time I've heard that unconsolable. Our son we were on a trip for the National Medical Association on an island and for a conference, and Andrew woke up and was just unconsolable and just had this night terror. And I never really equated that to the spectrum until you just said that, Zach. So I appreciate that. That was one of the things that we noticed early. He's probably about 18 months to 2 years old at that particular time. He was probably diagnosed when he started preschool by the teachers. They kind of said it to us. And then my wife actually paid attention to it. And I just kept saying, nah, he's just like me. I was a little knucklehead like that. I ain't paying no attention to nobody. I was off in my own world. And then, of course, I got my brother chirping in my ear, telling me the same thing as well.
Right.
And so, it wasn't until about 6 when we finally got him formally diagnosed. And at that particular time, they leaned more toward ADHD than on the spectrum. But most recently, we had him tested for the school, and they actually came back with a formal diagnosis telling us that he was truly indeed autistic, but on high functioning.
Right. So, gentlemen, I'm a little further along than all of you because my son is 27. So I want to chat a little bit about being a father, being a man with a son, or sons, as is the case of Mr. Hawkins, with autism. I will share with our listeners and viewers that for me, I try to be very honest as I travel the country and talk to people. I did not accept it at all. When Julian was first diagnosed as age 3, I was a lot like Dr. Bright. You heard said, well, my son, he's a knucklehead like I was. Well, I came from a Southern family that I knew I could straighten it out.
Right.
My son would not conduct himself this way. And that simply was not going to happen. Now, I was completely wrong. but I didn't see it yet. So with the grace of having my wife lording herself over me, I finally came around, but it took me a while. I didn't accept Julian's autism early on. I thought there was something that I could simply correct. So I wanted each of you to speak to, because I know that listening to this and watching this, there is a father out there right now who is struggling, who is trying to come to terms with this, because it's not easy, man. You know, this is our scion. He is going to carry my name. And honestly, that was not what I'd signed up for. And Julian's my oldest son. I have another son who's neurotypical Jared, but Julian is my oldest son. And for him to be labeled with autism was not something I would accept. And I will apologize to my administrative assistant. She's upset right now and she's barking, so I'm sorry. But I want us to discuss that, gentlemen. Being a man and a father of a son with autism, and that's open, whichever one of you would like to jump in.
I'll go. You know, this whole forum is very therapeutic for me, as you know, I hear the various father-son relationships. But you know, full transparency, I'm still grappling with it. You know, to see your son develop in a different way, and I use the word different because different is not a bad thing. And as I mature in this growth process, you know, I have multiple children, and you know, even if my child was not on the spectrum, we know as parents we have to raise children differently.
Sure.
And so, you know, just seeing the development in my neurotypical children, Lincoln and Ellington, it can be taxing. And you know, to further that point, you know, Frederick is going to be, he's a Black boy now, but he's going to be a Black man. And I can't help as a father knowing just the struggles as a Black man that's neurotypical or mainstream you have to deal with. And on top of, you know, his diverse abilities, just trying to prepare him and his mother and I to be as successful as possible. But you know, thank God for Google and research and forums like this that help us cultivate. And, you know, I know Dr. Bright and Representative Hawkins very well. And so, you know, it's good to have Black men that you can, you know, lean on and know that you're not alone in this journey.
Yeah, it's you know, you know, former educator, former bio guy, so I got that in common with Cedric. You know, I sort of went to that place when it looked like James Preston was going to have something that was a little different. And we started to learn, because as a former educator, you learn about all from IEPs, you learn about all of the different abilities and things that walk into a classroom and all the challenges that, you know, particular students may have. So it was something that was, you know, for our family, it was something that I wanted to make sure I knew rather than not, right? And the only thing that I could think about was, you know, how can I get over my feelings and do what's best for him? And that was a struggle between me and Tracy, because you know, you know, both of us were sort of thinking and had visions of what these kids were going to do and how they were going to do it. And but we had to grapple with what was directly in front of us. I mean, you know, I think the inability to have kids just go and play. I mean, that blows my mind. I grew up in the country. I grew up where you went outside and you were gone until the street lights came on. And you know that that's not your son. Like, you're literally gonna have to show him how to play. You're literally gonna have to pull in the patience of Job, because sometimes it's for unforgiving, right? And like you said, you know, I grew up in a, you know, Southern family too. My grandfather knew how to straighten the road, so to speak, and you know, make the flat roads, make the curvy roads flat. And so I was, you know, had a little bit of that in me too, and I think the biggest, you know, sort of portion of it was similar to what, you know, Frederick mentioned, is how can I prepare him? How can I prepare us? How can we, you know, really thrive through the situation, right? Because I mean, it's here now. you know, it's here now. It's nothing you can do about it. And we need to find the therapies to get it done. But it was just something that, you know, honestly, we cried when we got the diagnosis. I'll be 1,000% honest about that as a family, because it just hit us like a ton of bricks. Because even though we knew you don't know until you hear those words.
Right.
But the father sort of, you know, just kicked in to try and make sure that we did the best for him, and he couldn't talk. I mean, it was both of them. For both of them, Adam is probably 2 year and a half behind what his milestone is supposed to be as it relates to speech.
Mhm.
And James Preston was at the time, and now he can't shut up. But at the time, he was the same way, and it was just, you know, it was a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, but we tried our best to sort of make sure that we could, you know, get those therapies in place. But it was tough stuff, and I still worry about how his ability to cope and change will be, because at some point he's got to be somewhat independent. And then we also, honestly, and I'll shut up here, is that I have to reckon with the fact that I may not have anybody to take care of me when I'm old.
Mhm.
You know, and or we may have to have some assistive type of things for them for the rest of their lives. It's tough as a dad and thinking about it, but you know, we're all in here trying to just make it the best we can, I guess.
Mhm.
Wow, Zach, that was powerful. Maria and I got married at an older age. We had difficulty having a child. And so finally, when Andrew came along, I had a friend that asked me, so what do you want in your child? You know, boy, girl, what do you want? I said, I will take whatever God gives me. And they said, don't you want a healthy child? Wouldn't you just say that? And I said, if that is God's will, that is what is for me. Sometimes I actually rue the day that I said that, because trying to wrap my head around having a son and being an athlete myself, who was never going to be the athlete that I wanted him to be, who was never going to, well, I'm not going to say never, but who in his young ages was not able to do a lot of the things that I like to do. It took me a good long time to really wrap my head around it. And what I would say, just like Frederick, thank God for Google. Thank God for there's an autism thing, that Asperger's syndrome group that Maria, my wife, set me on. And I just started reading it because I needed something to help me. I needed something that you know, being a doctor and knowing all this knowledge about how to save lives, but yet I don't know how to take care of this child.
Mhm.
And so the reading helped me to understand some things, like, for instance, you know, the aspects about change, Zach. You know, I learned that I have to announce change. Andrew, in 20 minutes, we are going to go take out the trash, okay? And 10 minutes, Andrew, until we take out the trash. And then 21 minutes pass by, Andrew, we need to take out the trash. So, you know, you learn these little things. And the other thing I learned was not to ask him too many questions at one time, because when I do, he gets frustrated and he can't answer. And then I'm thinking that he's just ignoring me, but his brain is gone.
Yeah.
He's going a heck of a lot faster than I can get my own questions out. And he's just trying to figure out what answer does he really want to give. And so in learning small things like that, subtle things like that, I think that I am now an effective parent. I now have a better relationship with Andrew, because I'm not coming at him at a position of frustration. Because for the longest time, I kept trying the old Black way of raising my voice and threatening with a belt. And it wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't effective, and it wasn't the right thing to do. And so now I've learned that just speaking with him in a calm voice, keeping my emotions in check, and just being consistent in the way that we go about doing things has made his life much better, and mine.
Yeah.
We talked about what we've been talking about is really recognition. Another stage that follows on that continuum is acceptance. Now, I knew my son had autism when he was diagnosed at 3. I recognized it, but I still didn't fully accept it because, again, to be absolutely frank, I was concerned about what it said about me as a father, that I had a son who had autism, who was not as he was supposed to be. And so I grappled with that. And my wife, I mentioned her because she was the amazing one. She steered the ship in the beginning. One day she just came up to me. She had a load of literature for me. She had been giving it to me and I'd ignored it. And she just dropped it in my lap and she said, look, he is not trying to piss you off. This is not about you. It's about him. And that message finally sank through, that it's not about you. It's about the child and what is best for the child. And I understand that Mr. Davis is still coming to terms with that, and that's very natural. That's very natural. But Dr. Bright, you mentioned that you and Andrew are now, you're great buddies. Talk to us a little bit about getting to that point.
Getting to that point is spending time watching him play games. Getting to that point is telling him we're going to go to the golf course and you are going to drive the cart. Getting to that point is I'm going to the grocery store and you are coming with me. You know, if we continue to spend time away from each other, then we never get close to each other. And so what I have been working more on, and I'm not good at it, I'm not great at it. I mean, honestly, my wife was on it, she go, but the truth is, the more that I spend time with him, the more that I just kind of come up in the middle of the house when he comes downstairs looking for pizza, and I just say, come here, boy. And I just hug him. I just hug him.
Sure.
And then now it's to the point, every time he sees me, he punches me. Okay, because that's his way of saying, I love you,
Sure.
you know? And I've come to accept that. Some punches are beginning to hurt because like I said, he's 13 going on 14. And so someday I may have to hit him back just a little bit, hit him on the butt or something. But you know, I've come to recognize that that's his way of communicating his affection toward me. And I have now beginning to show him a lot of affection, because I think it's important as men that we show our sons affection and show them that we have emotion, because there's so many places where people are telling them just the opposite.
Mr. Hawkins, you have the duality of the spectrum, because you have Adam and you have James Preston's 5 and 7 respectively. I do, as I mentioned, have a neurotypical son, Jared. He's 2 years Julian's junior. But for you, and you mentioned that, you know, there may not be someone to take care of you later in life, and it's just one of those things that are part of life. But for you, as you look at the perspective of your 2 sons whom you love on the spectrum, the unfolding years, what do you think about?
You know, it's that's a really good question. I think that in many ways, James Preston, the older he gets, the more autism becomes here, but ADHD becomes larger. And with the right treatment and those things associated with it, he is now in a neurotypical classroom in the 1st grade with other peers and going to after school. From the time that he got diagnosed to now, he's speaking fully fluent, following, handle the Zoom thing. And so in many ways it feels like, because of the early intervention, he's going to be fine. But as Cedric mentioned, we still have to make sure that we are setting him up for success long term. So for the rest of his trajectory through high school, he will have to have the appropriate therapies and activities to keep that energy down. But we think that, James Preston will go through and be in normal classrooms or neurotypical classrooms. But, but Adam, for example, right now, is, like I mentioned, he's a little behind in speech and delays and still having to do all the therapies, and still has to go to preschool with an aide. with the therapist. And as his time rolls on, we don't know. It is a complete mystery. It is a complete mystery. And I think that our job, because they have two totally different personalities, is to try and make sure that we're doing two things. We're raising them, but then we're also trying to create pathways and clear pathways for them in the future, right? Like, what does it look like for them to be employed? What does it look like for them to be on a team? What is it, and trying to go and anticipate those things so that we can bring the knowledge sort of back in time to make sure that they're prepared.
Right.
And so it's quite the, like you said, it's not even a duality in with dealing with the two. It's the duality of living clearly in the future and trying to project and bring it to the present so that we can get them prepared. But I think that that's where it is, and I would say for the unfolding years for me and Tracy, it really is about honestly structuring our entire lives just around that. Because one thing that I'll say for folks for families that are not, that may be listening, but for those that do, it is consuming.
Yes, it is.
It consumes your life as a parent. And all you think about, for the most part, especially in the early days, is just that. And then again, how you're going to prepare for the future. And so those are what we see for at least the next 10 to 15 years for the trajectory of both of them. But our job is just to dig in and plan as much as possible. One thing that they have done for us as the years have unfolded, they've helped to structure our household. And I think, Cedric, you mentioned that. We literally have a theme for every day in our household. Everything has an announcement, everything has a buzzer, everything has a checklist. And so our ability to do that, to end here, helps them become more independent, specifically to go to the unfolding years. The more we do that, the more that they will be able to operate in a more neurotypical world. And so that's how we see it playing out. But past that, to be completely honest, we have no idea. Autism is unpredictable, and sometimes.
Well,
Yeah, well, that's going to work all the way up until he gets to be about 11, 12 and starts feeling like a teenager.
the saying is, if you met one person with autism, well, you met one person with autism. It is so different. So it's going to be interesting. Mr. Davis, you admitted that you are still in the middle of your coming to terms, your struggle. So where are you?
Well, again, my research has given me comfort. Mr. Ballin, I used to work with the Y with your sister-in-law, LaQuandra, and she offered your book at that time. And so just seeing other examples of fathers and just keeping my eye on the prize that, this will transcend to greater and better things. And so I'm hopeful and excited about the opportunity to raise a child that's on the spectrum. I will say, one of the things that I think, contribute to the struggles of myself and other Black fathers is that, I grew up in a Southern Baptist household. My father's a pastor and my mother is a teacher. And so, and I have two younger brothers. And so Davis Nation has been very competitive. But
Mhm.
what I want those who are listening and may see this later, your competitiveness doesn't mean you can't be compassionate. And with a child on the spectrum, your compassion definitely has to be greater than what you want your competitiveness to be. As Dr. Bright has said, um, early on, the playing catch and playing ball, uh, something that every father wants to do with their son. I realized that Frederick is not interested in that.
Right.
And even now, as Lincoln, his younger brother, 15 months, has asked, why is Frederick just screaming? You have to, well, Frederick is different. And, it's interesting to see that dynamic as a younger yet older brother because of his maturity having to switch roles. But you learn from your children and, the patience that Lincoln shows with his brother is tremendous. And so, you know, it is not necessarily it was a struggle, but I have accepted it and I have embraced it, and we have a story, Josephine and I, that we will one day hopefully, 20 years from now, be on a panel of younger Black fathers telling our success story.
Mhm. We all have paths we have to walk with this because, as we said, it's going to be different for everyone. But I have learned in 27 years with our son Julian, there are some universals, and maybe the most significant one, and it's hard for dads, it's hard for fathers because we want to fix things, we want to put them in order. One of the most important things is to find a way to access that child's world, because there is something in that child's world that lights them up. It could be trains. With our son, it's animals and all things Disney and Disney animated movies. His whole world revolves around that. My son, as I noted, is 27, but socially, if you're engaged with my son, you're really talking to about an 8-year-old. And so, but when I got to the point where I understood that we were always going to be referencing Disney animated movies, and we would sit and watch The Lion King 8 times over, and it was like a new time every time. You begin to learn and find moments of wonder in their world. And it sounds like, Dr. Bright, you've already begun to do that. And, can you tell us a little bit more about your insight into that?
Well, Andrew had some success playing baseball.
Mhm.
And, we found coaches that were very patient with him. And, he actually won a couple of titles in Durham with the Little League, the South Durham Little League. And so that was one of the first areas that, we were able to connect. No, he wasn't interested in throwing a ball, but I would just say, we're going to the park and we're going to go throw a baseball. And we would go do it. And like once again, it's just spending some time. And what I had to learn was not to always want him to do what I wanted to do, but I would say, Andrew, what do you want us to do today?
Mhm.
And then, and my wife has been very instrumental in doing and making sure that I do this on more of a consistent basis, because I can easily get lost in work. And so I have to be cautious about that to make sure I'm spending some time with my family in a interactive way, rather than just all of us existing in the house. But the things that Andrew likes, he likes his games. He likes his games, and now I've got him interested in the stock market. I told him, let's take some money and let's buy some of the stock of the games that you play. And we bought some Roblox, right? And then Roblox went from like $50 to $103. And he's like texting me in the middle of the day, Dad, Roblox is up to $103. We should buy some more. And I'm just like, okay, all right, now I got him hooked on figuring out how to make money with his own money. And and so it's just little things like that that I would not have imagined 6 years ago
Mhm.
that I would be at a point now. And so what I guess I'm saying is, by spending time with him, has helped me to not put him in a box,
Mhm.
continue to have some expectations of him, because when I give him expectations, when we give him expectations, he continues to rise up to those expectations. Like, he hit in the championship game when he hadn't hit a ball in the last 5 games at all. But all of a sudden now his back comes alive and he turns the first part of a double play. Never had done that the whole season. But when the lights come on, Andrew shows up. And so, I don't put him in a box. I give him expectations, but more importantly, I get excited about every new thing he shows us.
Mr. Hawkins, James Preston and Adam are 2 different individuals.
Yeah.
How are you able to connect into both of them, you and your wife?
It is realizing that now Adam looks like her, James Preston looks like me, but the personalities are swapped.
Oh, wow.
It's the wildest thing. But it's recognizing that Adam sometimes he's incredibly laid back. He likes what he likes. And sometimes when he wants to be left alone, you do just that. But the thing about him is that you can always tell that his mind is moving, but the way to tap into Adam is food. He loves talking about food. He loves going to the refrigerator. He loves trying to make things. He jumps in the car when daddy goes somewhere because he knows daddy's going to set him out with a snack or something like that. And with James Preston, he has his mother's personality. So he likes camera action all the time. And so that level of excitement is somewhere that you have to meet him there. You have to do exciting things. You have to go and let's take a trip. Let's go somewhere new. Let's try something different. And he is competitive, and that I can relate to.
Mhm.
And so I don't care if it's running up the steps. Let's run up the steps together and see who can make it first. Like those kinds of connections and ways that I can connect with him. He is now starting to try and think about different sports. Those kinds of things just allow us to do that. But one that's most important for us is family night,
Mhm.
family movie night, pizza night, and movie night. And so we just love that, and everybody comes together. But it's really one of the things that we realized early on when we had 3 and 2 on the spectrum is that Tracy and I, we have 5 different relationships. I need to have a relationship with each one of my sons and spend time with them individually. But then we need to create opportunities as a family where we can do that. And that really has helped us get to know them a little bit better and find those little things that make it all work. But yeah, all those things. Once you figure those things out, it's a beautiful thing, and we really have enjoyed it the last couple of years getting it.
Mr. Davis, you mentioned something earlier about Lincoln, one of your neurotypicals, questioning the behavior of Frederick. And that's something that we in the community have to deal with. As I know that I have a son who is 2 years, Julian's junior, and we had to deal with that. And we found that it was very difficult at first because he could never quite understand why his brother did not want to come outside and play with him, why he wouldn't throw a ball with him, why he would have tantrums. And one day he even said to me, he thought Julian was trying to ruin our family. And that's just something a child says because he doesn't understand. So for us, we had to come to terms with helping Jared understand. And also, I will say as a father, to any father out there watching this, when you have a scenario like that, where you have one who's neurotypical or more than one, please be careful about being overly punitive with the one that's neurotypical, simply because what I did, and again, this is me talking from my experience, because I thought, well, you should know better. You should know better. I'm not talking to him, I'm talking to you. And that is not right. That is not good to unload on a kid. But I'm just saying, out of experience, please be cautious about that. Mr. Davis, you mentioned Lincoln.
Yes.
How are he and Ellington handling this?
Well, Ellington is 19 months, but she's a girl, so she's like
Ellington.
5 now. But yeah, we have to be careful. And as you mentioned, when we send them away, Lincoln, watch out for Frederick. But we got to let Lincoln grow up as a neurotypical 5-year-old. Now, Lincoln is amazing in his own right. He doesn't mind making sure Frederick is not doing what he's not supposed to be doing. So again, it's a definitely delicate dance. But again, as Zach mentioned, we take both of them out, and Frederick will run for a little while. But when Frederick's done, Frederick will either say, "I'm done," or "Let's go to the car," and Frederick is done. And then it's just me and Lincoln playing, or me, Lincoln, and Ellington. So, he's at 5. He's questioned, and he's even told his grandmother that Frederick doesn't really talk that much, but it's okay. I do most of the talking. So children are amazing, but we definitely are mindful not to steal his innocence. But I think one of the things dealing with children on the spectrum is, from the outside, nobody knows, and all they see is a 6 and 7-year-old, and I've had to remind adults, even in the school system, that hey, this child needs a little bit more attention, even though he looks and looks the part, and you think you just say one thing and he should do it. No, this child needs, so helping others to know that as there are many spectrums, diverse abilities, and disabilities. Autism is unique because from the outside, you can't diagnose it, right?
Sure.
And so that is, something that we're educating others, including our own family, when they get around their cousins and other friends, you know. But acceptance is key in all parts. So.
Dr. Bright, I saw your eyebrows go up while we were discussing. Care to share?
I just, I was very fortunate to have a wife that did those things, because at that time I was in leadership of an organization, and I mean, she was so instrumental in making sure that people understood what Andrew's, without handicapping him, allowing him to reach a potential, but at the same time reminding people that he's a little different, and that different doesn't mean deficit. It doesn't mean that he's unable or unable. And so just hearing Frederick's story just reminds me of where we were. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of this, so I can just celebrate with them for where they are right now and tell them about where I am right now.
Mhm.
And so I'm also very glad to hear your story, because your story is giving me hope too.
We talk, everyone here has mentioned their better half at some point. And I know the people out there watching this are different stages of this experience, but it's not easy. And the divorce rate in the autism community is very high. Unfortunately, present company accepted, except a lot of men walk away. They just can't handle it. It's the documented evidence. There are a lot of women walking around who have been left with children on the autism spectrum because their partner simply could not handle it. It is not easy on a marriage. Again, frankly, it has strained my marriage. My wife and I have been married for 35 years, and it strained our marriage greatly when I was in that stage where I didn't want to accept it. That just wasn't the case, and it's difficult in a marriage. And I know people out there watching. I don't want you to think you're alone. If you're kind of at odds, there's tension with each other. It happens. I don't know if any of the three of you care to share about holding fast and making it work together. But again, I'll be honest, I wouldn't be sitting here without my amazing wife. It has not been easy. There were times when we were in different parts of the house, but
Yeah.
we got through it. So I don't know if
Dwayne, I'll chime in. When I married my friend Josephine, I married her with no expectations,
Mhm.
which meant that whatever happened, I was in it for the fight. And I had to remind myself through various experiences that I married her with no expectations. And so, as human beings, we see things differently anyhow. And I don't know about the other panelists or you, Dwayne, but raising a child on the spectrum is expensive.
Yep.
Okay, and you know, I my wife and I are blessed to be fortunate than others to be able to out of pocket raise, help our son. Um, but I'm a results based type of guy. Maybe that's coming from the competitiveness, and as you matriculate through this spectrum or raising children, you know, those results don't come in a neurotypical fashion, right? So if your child needs to study for a math test and you go to Huntington Beach, my expectation is I spent money at Huntington Beach, my child is going to pass that math test. And so in the same vein, as we, spend money and resources for our child, OT and therapy, my competitive expectations that, he should be, communicating on the level of everyone else. I mean, because I'm shelling out money. And so, oftentimes we find that it may not be the autism that's causing the divorce, but it's those other mitigating factors like money or time, those things or resources that take away from either other children or your spouse. But you got to be on one accord. And I'm a believer, and I believe that love conquers all. And if that is first, and if God is first in the triangle, sound like my father, amazingly. You will overcome everything, but it is not for the faint at heart. And I think God doesn't make mistakes, and God gives parents to children on the spectrum who's supposed to be children, parents of children on the spectrum. So
Yeah, yeah, we I was the first to accept, but when that green light went on for Tracy, she became the biggest autism advocate on the planet Earth. She dedicates literally every day to learning more and now creating communities for other people to come to the point of acceptance and the point of advocacy for people. And so we decided sort of that together, that we did ask the why God question, right? And we're believers, but we did ask the why God question. And once it hit us, is that your story, your ability to go do this can be an example for somebody else, can be a testimony for somebody else, and will speak to other people. And once you sort of get there, and once you get to that place, and you realize that, one of the things we said, it's like we're going to pour ourselves into each other. We're going to do this together. We're going to have each other's back. When you get to that point, it is, it's you, and again, almost like you against the world feeling, right? And it's a good place, because it brought us really, really close. Like we're more disciplined because the kids require it, right? We've been able to become, better managers of our household because our kids require it.
Mhm.
And the better we see, the better that we do those kinds of things, the better that it makes our marriage, right? So that, because we have to negotiate work schedules and community schedules and all those things, right? And without them, I don't know if we would have gotten there, right? And I think that in many, many ways, it's blessed us to be able and be willing to be vulnerable, not only to each other, but to people that we don't even know. And you're right, though. It's a taxing thing. It is not for the faint of heart. That's a good way to put it. But for people that are going through it, that are listening, dive into it with your partner.
Right.
Dive into it with them, and find ways to love each other like you haven't loved before, because you're gonna need it when those tantrums come, when those challenging times come. And because sometimes autism is unexpected. You could be having an incredible day
Right.
and it turns on a dime. And if y'all, if you haven't practiced, when the lights go on, it's not a pretty sight. And so we definitely dive into each other pretty deep to make it work.
Mr. Hawkins, you just touched upon something I was going to go into next, is that, we all love our children dearly and we do anything for them, but autism is hard. It's hard. There's despair, there's anger, there is bewilderment. It's not easy at all. In the 27 years that we have lived it, we've run the gamut. Your child can suddenly erupt, as Mr. Hawkins noted, with no regard for the setting or where you are or decorum. They just erupt. They can lose it. And the hardest part about it and being a parent is sometimes you have no idea where it came from. You don't know what it is. You can only kind of just brace yourself and try and hold that child as best you can and get through it. So those watching, there are going to be times when you feel like you're going through hell. But as Winston Churchill said, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah, keep going. That's exactly right.
Keep going. Because it's, gentlemen, it's just, there are going to be times when it's really going to be just the worst. And there's no other way to put it.
Yeah. So I wanted to chime in on that, because the one word that you didn't talk about was blame. And sometimes what happens is we think about all the sins that we've had in our past and how those sins may have been now manifested in this child as a means for why this occurred. And then we both start blaming ourselves for that. And once we get into the blame game, it starts to spiral into a depression. And at some point you find you and your spouse are both in a depression and you don't know why. And fortunately for us, we're now on the other side of that, I think, for the most part. And it's because of we have found a way to communicate and talk and to focus on Andrew. And my wife has really just basically sacrificed her corporate career to do these things for Andrew. And at the same time, you know, I continue to do things that I can do to try to make sure that we all have what we need. Yes, Andrew.
You're talking about me.
Okay, okay.
What does Andrew want us to know?
He said you're talking like he's in the kitchen. He's like, you said you're talking about me as if I'm not here and I don't want to know. So, but you know, we've gotten to a point, and I think faith is the thing that has grounded us. And you go tell your father, Frederick, that that the faith that we learned in worship is what carries us through this point. It's not easy, but if you can at least ground yourself in something, and grounding ourselves in our faith is what made the difference.
Mr. Davis, you mentioned earlier about the cost, and there are all kind of things that come at you that you never anticipate simply because you have to avail yourself of resources for your child. I think we should also stress the importance of finding what some of the other resources are. I think we all live in the state of North Carolina, and I know the Autism Society of North Carolina it may very well be the best chapter in the country. And I know it's been great for us, a great resource for us. And there are a number of autism advocacy groups. And I know that at the UNC, where Mr. Hawkins is, they've got the Autism Center there, led by Dr. Joseph Piven, which is world class. So I know there are resources. I think we have to be very diligent in digging and ferreting out opportunities and places that will help us in this adventure with our child.
And spaces where we may be the only one.
Yeah.
You know, and not be afraid to reach out into communities that don't necessarily look like us in order to receive the help for our kids.
Yeah, I would say that's one thing too, is that as we started going through the process, like you said, luckily enough, we learned about Teach. We had people that we could go to. Tracy, immediately called her insurance company to see what they would cover.
Sure.
Because we needed all the therapies. We needed speech, we needed ABA, we needed OT. We needed, those three for James Preston, and but ABA was better for Adam. ABA and speech were better for him. And so it hits you like a ton of bricks that even for us, in some ways, some of the navigation was really hard.
Right.
Some of the ability and the resources, even when you get to school, were really hard to navigate. And you're thinking, well, what are people doing that don't have this kind of flexibility and don't have access to resources? That's the thing that it humbles you, because you have that opportunity to make better for your children. But for the people that don't, it's just, it's crushing to me.
Sure. Something I will mention that, again, because of where we are. Go ahead, Dr. Brown. Or was that Mr. Davis? Well, okay, I think we're having some technical problems with Mr. Davis right now. Something I will mention because of where we are in our journey with Julian.
Oh, absolutely.
Something you need to consider, those of you listening, is guardianship for your child when they approach the age of 18. Because unless you do something, when that child turns 18, they are legally an adult. Therefore, they can sign contracts, they can be held accountable for things that they can't have no concept of, and their life could literally go off the rails, as could yours. So we recognize that early, we got counsel. So I am Julian's legal guardian. So my son could sign a contract, but it wouldn't be binding. He can't, I'm the responsible person, and my wife secondarily for him. And we are so thankful we did that. It's not an easy thing, because of the nature of the process. A sheriff's deputy has to walk up to your child and hand them papers, letting them know that they have been deemed incompetent to take care of themselves by the state. And that's a hard thing. But we were fortunate. We got into the system, and the sheriff's office had worked with people like before like this, and they were so nice. He just started talking to Julian. He said, Julian, I got some papers for you. Your dad knows all about it. You know, it's cool. I just want to give them to you, okay? Dad and your mom will be taking care of you. And Julian was just as fine as he could be. But I just want people to be aware that that's something you have to think about, because before they get 18, you have to determine whether or not it's in their best interest. That can always be reversed, but you have to think about that.
Thank you for sharing that, because I did not know that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you want to do that. But that's something you want to do. We're about to move into our next phase where we have question and answers. And before we do that, I'd like to give each of you gentlemen opportunity for some brief closing thoughts. So start with you, Mr. Hawkins.
Well, I'm thankful for Thriving on the Spectrum, and for you, Mr. Ballin, for moderating. I think that these types of conversations for all dads, but especially for dads of color, is one of the most important things that we can do to help people navigate through acceptance and thriving and building better and stronger families, so that they can, as Dr. Bright said, connect with their children and find out how they can maximize their ability. Because that's where we've gotten to through all of the pain, is just that, like, what can we do to make sure that we become a better family, and that we do things that are going to help make their lives better. But don't be afraid to reach out to anyone that you know, share your story, get involved, and make sure that you provide as many resources as you can, because it's a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Take it day at a time. Get up and be patient, and make sure you love your child.
Dr. Bright?
Ditto. I can't really add anything more to that, except to say that you nailed it right there, Zach. And inch by inch, our life can be a cinch, and yard by yard. Of course, now my son is mimicking me behind. Yard by yard, life can be hard. Because I say that to him all the time, because I'm trying to get him to understand how to do things incrementally. But certainly this journey with him, and to have a helpmate like I have, I wouldn't change it for anything in the world.
Mr. Davis, any thoughts before we move to our Q&A with our Facebook friends?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Technical difficulties, but raising a child on the spectrum, this is nothing. I would say, I would add one key point. It's okay to take breaks as parents, to regroup, to rejuvenate yourself. I think that's most important, because we are human first, and parents. So it's good to take your spouse out, or let your spouse go away for a couple of hours to regroup, because this is hard work, and as a muscle builder or NBA basketball player, you got to get that therapy to get you back in the game. So yeah, but everything else right in line.
Gentlemen, a couple more minutes. Anything else to the Black community? Because as I said, I grew up in the South, and I had a mother-in-law who was perfect and who was awesome in so many ways, but she never really accepted Julian's autism, because in her world, in her generation, that boy is going to be okay. And that's something I think in our community we have to get past too, correct?
But okay is a spectrum.
That's right.
There's okay is in a lot of things, and we as Black people are not monolithic. There's no one Black person, although we are lumped together in markedness, but we are not indeed just one type of way. And so I think okay is one of those things. It's so wide of a terminology. In the end, your child is okay. You said it. Your child is okay, right? It wasn't the okay that she meant,
Right.
but your 27-year-old is okay. And
Right.
guess what? Andrew is okay too.
Yeah.
That's right. I think when you open it up, Dwayne, that it's not about you.
Right.
Make sure that you open yourselves up to learning more than using the belt. Make sure that you understand autism and understand it can happen to us. Now, it's not as prevalent. And, I'm like you, I didn't know anything about autism for a long time. And now I'm engrossed in it, but it can happen to communities of color. And we have to accept that and make sure that we're not ashamed. I would specifically say that it is, like you said, it's okay. You're going to be okay. It happens to us, and you just have to deal with it and open your heart. Because I think sometimes it's just where we find ourselves is not accepting and thinking that it's not a part of our community, and it really, really is. And the sooner we get there, the more that we can find more kids who have it and give them what they need so they can survive in this world that's already hard enough as Black men.
And we encourage you watching now on Facebook, please put your questions in chat. We'd love to field them and discuss them. We want to bring you into the conversation as we wait for your questions. Gentlemen, one thing I did is I opened myself up and basically, got in access to Julian's world. And I found so much out about my son. But one of the things our son can do so well is he draws animals, and he draws Disney figures. And that piece of work right behind me, he drew that. He's so talented in that regard. He has amazing encyclopedic recall about animals and where they live and what their traits are. And he can tell you anything about a Disney animated movie. Now, he doesn't understand algebra or calculus at all, doesn't know much about history. But we found through accessing his world, we found the things that worked with him. And we made that part of our connection to him. And I assume that you all are beginning to understand that or have understood that.
Oh yeah, it's angry fish. My son can any beluga whales, hammerhead shark, you name it. He is so in the biomedical field or some type of agri-science, maybe down east. Zach, he could start some stuff with that. But yeah, fish is his thing.
I'm going to hold you there, gentlemen. We got our first question, so we want to get our friends in, and we'll continue our discussion. A question: how did you share the diagnosis with your family? Were you fearful they just wouldn't understand or accept it? We touched upon that a minute ago. Who wants to jump on that?
I'll go first and I'll be brief. So, basically, my wife and I shared it with our families, and as I said previously, they had their own opinions about what was going on, and saying that if he's autistic, then that means you and I were autistic as little boys too, and but over time it does, people do come to understand that it's real, and it's not just something that that is in a science book, DMS-5 at this point, which is the psychiatry book on how we make diagnoses about children and disorders and about people in disorders. So it's real, and they had to come to accept it as we did.
Yeah, we told our family too. Our family's from Eastern North Carolina, and you don't necessarily hear about that as much, down there. And I think the biggest thing that they, of course, went to prayer. Even to the point of sometimes saying, we're gonna pray the autism leaves it. It's just like but giving them the experience to see it gradually was helpful for us. Because they would hear us talk about our days, but when they had a chance to spend time and see it for themselves, they understood that it was more than just a kid acting like a brat or a kid not getting what he wanted.
Right.
We had to make sure we showed it to them to back up our experiences that we were telling them over the phone.
Okay, my wife is there and accepts my son and wants to have him tested, but I am just not there. Any advice? That one just came in. The father's not there. The wife wants to have the child tested, and the father's not there. I'll start off and say, well, as we said before, what you have to understand, sir, is it is not about you. It's about that child. So the more you delay getting testing official and getting resources for the child, the worse off it will be for the child's life and for your life. So that's very important. Gentlemen, anyone want to join in on that?
Early diagnosis is so crucial.
Mhm.
You know, I think all of the things that Andrew has been able to accomplish have been because he was diagnosed so early, and my wife was so unbelievable at making sure that he was going to get everything that he needed to make sure he could be the best that he could be.
That
So
sounds so familiar.
diagnosis is crucial.
That sounds so familiar. There's another gentleman thanking us. He's on his path now, and he feels like this discussion has helped him a lot. The first question we got was about telling your family. Gentlemen, and I don't know where you are yet, your kids are different ages, but I know we went through this, and I don't know, Dr. Bright, if you have yet, with Andrew being 13, but at the point that we had to tell Julian that he had autism was one of the most difficult things we've ever dealt with, because you're telling your child they're different and they don't understand. And Julian, he didn't react well. He didn't understand it. But so, Dr. Bright, have you gotten there yet? I assume the other two gentlemen haven't because of the children's ages, but have you gotten there yet?
I think Andrew accepts who he is, and he's just him. He is uniquely and beautifully made as him.
Yeah. We've shared it with James Preston, and so he's starting to grapple with it. And because we didn't want his classmates or his teachers to know something about him that he didn't. And so we tried to explain it to him in ways that he would understand, and so that he could start to own it and manage his emotions and his reactions, so he would know why. We didn't want to walk into any of this blind.
Right. We told Julian when he was 12, because we recognized that there was this coming social divergence between he and the kids, his peers. We saw it coming, and we didn't want him to feel, he was already beginning to feel some of it, being bullied slightly, kids making fun of him. So we wanted him to understand that he was wonderful. But we wanted him to know he was different, and there was a reason for this. And we would get him to a point where he understood that. And a couple other questions come in. How can I begin plugging into the resources? Where do I start with getting my daughter diagnosed? And what resources have you found to be successful thus far? Okay, I can start on that. As I know that the Autism Society of North Carolina is a tremendous organization. You can go to their website. You can contact them. Tell them I sent you. They're great people. Over at UNC, where Mr. Hawkins is, you've got TEACH program. Dr. Joseph Piven runs the Autism Center. Actually, the University of North Carolina, according to the Health and Human Services Department, is the #1 public institution in the world for autism research. Not in the state, in the world. It's #1 in the world. So contact UNC's Autism Center, the TEACH program. You can get your diagnosis done there, and they can give you some steps. They can put you in groups, because that's what they did with us when Julian was diagnosed. And those resources have helped. When you're in the school system, you're going to have to get advocates and have to get people to help you through the system, because you're going to have to get a plan for your child. And it gets much more difficult as they get into high school. High school was frankly hell for our son, Julian. We live in Durham, North Carolina. He went to the Durham School of the Arts, but he had to be pulled out, had to go to a special school too. But it's hard. So you've got to brace yourself for that. And I think get advocates to work with you. So go to some of these sources we just mentioned, and prepare yourself, because again, it was hard. Here's another one. Let's see. I have been on the journey for a while with 2 sons, 19 and 16 on the spectrum. I just want to thank you guys for this awesome conversation. Would love to share my story sometimes as well. I will give his name because you probably know his name. His name is Nay Brown, former football player at UNC. And I think he played in the NFL for a while. So he's got a 19 and 16-year-old, and he's coming to terms with that now. So that's something, gentlemen, that we see a lot. And I guess one thing, guys, we got to be open to embracing each other, right? Let each other know that, hey, this is what being a man is.
That's right. You're only facing what other men have met. And when you get a chance to do that and find and build community, it's a friendship, that It's one, and like, you know, Frederick and I will get sometimes again, and it's comforting to be around other fathers who get it, that you don't have to explain it to. And the sooner that you can get to that point where you find yourself a community virtually or in person, it is very helpful and relieving with the stress that you deal with.
Yeah,
I'd say we need a support group. Do we have a support group for Black fathers that have children with autism? Is there one?
Well, knowing Mr. Hawkins' wife, Tracy, is the producer of this program, knowing her drive, we probably will.
That's right. You gave her an idea.
We should do that. We should definitely do that.
We probably will. Hey, guys, let me ask you something. Having Julian has just opened up my eyes. I see the world through his eyes, and it's opened up my eyes too. I'm much more empathetic. I can't tell you the number of times we've been in public places and I see a child and I know exactly what's going on, and I see the look of exasperation on that parent's face, and I just look at him and smile and go, it's okay. I completely, if he wants to walk this way, let him come this way. I've got all the time in the world. Have you experienced that, the empathy and recognition?
I have personally. Like Zach said, you know, when we get together, you know, if Adam Preston or Adam comes up to me and does something, you know, hey, it's okay. I understand, and I feel like, you know, same with my son with Frederick. If he, you know, if Zach asks him a question, he may not answer. I know Zach understands that Frederick learns at a different pace. But you know what is really increasingly interesting for me is now that I have a son on the spectrum, you know, people don't talk about it, but there are adults who were not diagnosed that you now have a different patience for, because you see some of their idiosyncrasies that, you know, because of our past not having the resources and not knowing, even when I was in high school, when I was a kid, being a kid, saying, oh man, I picked on Tony for being different. And now I see, well, Tony wasn't different, or I see what it was all about. So, you know, having a child on the spectrum has opened up my eyes to just the world, like you said.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that it does is, even just in life in general, I don't assume that anybody knows how to do anything. Just like my son just can't go out and do something, I make sure that I explain things well. I make sure that I'm patient. I make sure I give more than enough time, and it really it's sort of changed the way I, like you said, I interact with all people, not just ones that I suspect to be on the spectrum. And it's, again, it's a life-changing opportunity for you just honestly to become a better man. And that's one thing I do want to share with people. It really does make you a better person.
Yeah, I agree with all of those sentiments, and it's opened my eyes to being able to be more observant of those around me. And then when I'm more observant with those around me, I can treat them with more compassion. And that is just because of what I have to do. Zach, you're absolutely right. I keep forgetting that Andrew hasn't learned how to open a can on, because he's never used a can opener. And I'm like, just use the can opener, open the can. And he's like turning the can sideways and trying to open it. And oh man, no, he doesn't know because he doesn't know.
Right. And that's just the way it is with certain things. And, you know, like if I ask Julian what a echidna is, I mean, I don't know what it is, but he can run down this list for me. Now, there's a lot of things he can't do, but there are things that he knows and he can do that blow me away. So, also I find out when I'm out in public, you learn to be a very good communicator with other people who are encountering your child for the first time. And you watch them as they interact with your child. For Julian, example, when Julian meets someone, he's very outgoing now. He will automatically say to you, whatever the setting you're in, it reminds him of The Lion King or The Princess and the Frog, or so. He'll say it reminds him of a Disney movie. And if he says to you, meeting you, what does this remind you of? It's a trap, because he's going to get you into a Disney movie. So I watch people and I give them a look, and most of the time, have you found that people get it fairly quickly?
Now, we've been shushed in church before.
Okay. Shushed in church.
We've been shushed in church. I'll be honest about that. And there are some folks that don't. But I think, like you said, once we sort of give the disclaimer, the entire sort of interaction changes.
Mhm.
And so I have been very sort of, pleased with that, as people and humans that you don't know that interact with your child, once you let them know what
Mhm.
he has autism. When they see that, they're like, got it.
Mhm.
And they interact with them in a completely different way, and that's really humanizing. Right? I appreciate that, because it shows that the world is a kinder place than sometimes we get it credit for.
Mhm. And there will always be those embarrassing moments out in public. And I will tell you, fathers out there, just as I had to learn to get over it, you learn to get over it. There are moments that your child's going to do things that they're going to show out. That's just what it is. And no matter what age they are, Julie's 27 now, but Julie's very capable of just letting it go in public. And you have to learn to understand that. But along with that comes things. When Julian was younger, he didn't want to be touched. He was not very verbal. And now he wants to hug me all the time. We hug all the time. So Julian and I were in the market not too long ago, and he just was hugging me. I was looking for something on the shelf, and he's standing behind me, hugging me. And he's an adult male now, and I'm just touching his shoulder and touching his head. And a woman out the corner of my eye, I see her, and she's looking at me like a man. A man shouldn't be hugging a young man, his father, like that. It is, well, lady, I'm very happy. This is awesome. So sometimes, you have to just work your way through that. So there are always going to be those who don't understand, but then there are those who do.
Yeah, I was going to actually mention that myself, that there's sometimes they just don't, you tell them what's going on and they still don't understand what that means.
Right.
And so, but that's where we always have to have a modicum of grace.
Mhm.
And that's where we have to use that modicum of grace to just either educate or just to forgive. And because that's the one or two ways that you can help them to understand. You either educate them or you forgive them.
Have any of you thought yet, and this is something that parents have to deal with, and we finally gotten past it, but it was later than most people. The idea of your child being away from you and your spouse for an extended period of time, not with grandparents or a close uncle or aunt, but really away. For instance, Julian went to the Autism Society of North Carolina. I mentioned they have this wonderful camp called Camp Royal that is outside of Pittsburgh. And it's a wonderful place. And it took them forever to convince me to let Julian go, because it meant he would be away from us for a week. And I could not wrap my head around that. Again, a couple of you kids are much younger, but I go back to you, Dr. Bright, because Andrew's 13 and he's about to that point. Can you and your wife conceive of him being away from you for a week?
I can see that he could do it, but I don't know if I'm ready to.
Right. That's it. That's it. Are you ready? And I will confess, and I'm saying this to share this with a lot of people watching too, those who may have feelings. You're not alone. Julian was 16, and he was going to Camp Royal, and I remember I was on edge, and I called the counselors, and they are wonderful there. I called the counselors that night to speak to him, and they said to me firmly but politely, "Oh, he's fine." Now, that's not the answer I wanted to hear. And no, I need to speak to my child. "Oh, he's great. He's at the campfire right now. They're having a good time." So I kept calling, and finally they stopped answering. But it was, and you know what? And I was worried. I thought of all the things that could go wrong with my son. I planned everything out for him. I laid out his clothes. I said, "These are your clothes on Monday. These are your clothes on Tuesday." I put everything in order. "You just put this on when you get up." And I told the counselors, and they kept telling me, "He'll be fine. He'll be himself. He'll be wonderful." Cut to the end of the week when I went to pick him up out there. He was at breakfast. He was coming back from breakfast. I was in his cabin. I could see him coming down the road. And he had on a pajama top, some jeans, 2 socks that didn't match, a pair of sandals, and he was happy as he could be. He had the best time. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to be concerned about what he's wearing, and they take care of this. This is what they do. And look at his face, just as happy as he could be.
Yeah. We're graduating to that point. Adam's going to go to an autism camp in Morehead City, and James Preston is going to go to another camp, but it's a day camp so that someone can drop off and pick up. so that we know we can start to test levels of independence. Because I'm with you, Dwayne. I would completely freak out.
I did
Yeah.
completely. I lost it.
Yeah, and you're right, but it's almost like Cedric said. You gotta let it go and let them and know that they're gonna have a little independence. We went to water country,
Mhm.
and they were a little younger, but they had the best time. And James Preston even got ahead of me and went on a roller coaster like a slide by himself. We were like mind blown. And so those little instances give you light at the end of the tunnel. But we're gonna gradually get there for him to be away from us
Yeah.
for a whole week. I need to build up to that one.
We encourage you while we're still on, please, if you have more questions, please just bring your questions into our chat and we'll be happy to discuss them. One of the things that we found out when Julian left, and this is a moment for a parent who, on the spectrum. You don't realize how much you've been doing and how much you really honestly need to be with each other and just be two humans engaged in a relationship together, because the child demands so much and you want to give everything you can to that child. And when Julian was gone that week, it was so once I got over my trepidation, it was just so eye-opening. And I think Mr. Hawkins, you mentioned it earlier in our discussion, that let's never lose sight of the relationship that brought forth this family. Let's never lose sight of that. And I think that's the thing that I would tell a lot of people watching is try not to lose sight of that. It's hard, but try not to lose sight of that.
Yeah, I would say that we decided to pour ourselves into each other, because at the end of the day, we're all we have. And that's okay. You and I can make it. We can do it if we are working together. The other thing that I would tell any dad is, if you want to keep that relationship tight, don't just depend on your family to help with childcare, because you will tax your family out if your family is not at a point where they completely understand. Or does that make sense?
Yes.
Or your parents are a little older, and so I don't care where I am. I try my best to recruit babysitters. I want to have a stable of babysitters, because sometimes people are available, and so if we can have 5 people that we can start working through, so that if we need a little extra time, or we need to go somewhere, or she has to go out of town, or whatever the case is, or just a date night, make sure you have those kinds of things at your disposal and people that can give you that relief, and never stop working at it. Because again, people are gonna cycle in and cycle out, and you just don't understand until you get there that you need that kind of relief, and you don't want to be scrambling when you're at your wits end, because sometimes, again, autism does take you there.
Mr. Davis.
Yeah, echo. It's a I use sports analogies a lot. You gotta have high expectations, but you can't have low patience. They have to be coincide. And we had talked about earlier, your family and their adjustment to it. My story is interesting. My father, so the panelists know my father is, again, a Baptist pastor, and so spare the rod and not the child. But I know he has parishioners that have had children on the spectrum, and he's really embraced that when it comes to. I know Zach said about being shushed in church. He will correct right then and there, like that is a child of God, and it is okay for outbursts to appear. So he's always embraced it. Now, having a grandson and his namesake is very interesting, because I don't know if it's just being a G daddy now, and his patience is more than what it used to be for myself and his other 2 sons. Because in the Davis household, if I told you to move, I don't tell you a second time.
I move you.
yeah. So it's that dynamic, but we're growing together, and we're feeding them information as well. And so I just wanted piggyback on that, but again, your helpmate is critical in this journey, and it is never going to be 50-50. We've all shared it. It's going to be 80-20, 20-80. But we all are in that same goal of raising Black children. And that is going to always be key.
How much
The
do
one
you,
word that I would add to that conversation, Dwayne, is forgiveness.
Mm,
We have to forgive ourselves for the things that we've done in our past that we think are being brought to our present. And we have to forgive each other for the times that we should have been there, but we weren't there. And we then have to forgive our child for whatever it is that he or she does that is displeasing to us. And then most important, we have to forgive ourselves and give ourselves that ability to be able to come back, make a mistake, come back and try again, because this is all about the next time, the next time. You might not get it right this time, but hopefully if I keep going through this, I'm gonna get it better the next time. And that's where forgiveness comes in.
Yeah, I always said that forgiveness, for yourself and your spouse is so important, because again, you're not gonna react correctly every single time. And that is just, thank you for bringing it up, Dr. Bright. That is such an important point for fathers that are just getting into this journey, because you get up the next day, and you live to fight another day.
words well put, gentlemen. We cannot leave you without giving proper attribution. Mr. Hawkins' wife, Tracy Hawkins, was executive producer and conceiver of this program. We owe her a debt of gratitude for putting this together. And in closing, I would just like to say, again, as the one who has the child who's gone the farthest so far, my 27-year-old son, Julian. When Julian was first diagnosed, he wasn't verbal. There was a point when we didn't know he would talk. He would tantrum, and at the time I was working. I'm in media, so I was a television anchor, network anchor, based in Los Angeles. But my family was here in North Carolina, so I flew home once a week from Los Angeles just to be here for basically a day and a half. So I was really removed from it, and my wife was in it. We had a nanny, but still, it was very, very hard. And I remember one night I was on the phone with my wife, and I could hear it in her voice. He had been especially disruptive that day. He had torn up his room. Things had to be removed out of his room. We didn't know how much danger he would cause himself. And she said to me, I don't even know if he's ever going to speak to me. Will he even ever say mom? And that ripped my heart out. And we went through that for a number of years where we didn't know. But when he began to speak, he didn't stop. He loves Disney movies. My son watches the movie Soul all day long in our den. And when he goes to bed in the evening, it's usually The Lion King or Frozen. And he does this every day over and over. But to him, it's a new experience. It's an exciting experience. And it's what he wants to talk about, that and animals, enjoying animals. When I finally decided to allow myself access to him, and I realized it was no longer about me, but it was about my son, his world opened up to me. He and I went from being at odds, I didn't really want to deal with him much, to we are almost grafted together now. He is my buddy. I love his brother dearly. And Julie and I have a special bond. And I would tell all of you fathers, look for that bond. Won't be easy, but you can get there. I promise you, it'll be worth it. Thanks for watching.